we too have our own unique strengths and our own unique vulnerabilities and our ways of dealing with them. Getting to know them and appreciate them and what they teach us about being human is an important part of what we do together in beloved community. Like animals, we are also known to ingeniously mask our vulnerabilities as strengths when we feel threatened. We can develop and employ all sorts of creative tactics to make it seem that we are completely in control, or weaker than we actually are, in order to survive. Despite all those efforts to be or to appear in control, there is something that we have no control over. Like animals, we also eventually die. Now, where humans differ from other animals is that we, as far as we can tell, are the only animals who know that this will, in fact, happen. And more so, who know that life's greatest task really is to love, to hold close what we love, and then to let go when the time comes. We humans so fear the mysterious inevitability of that truth. We feel so vulnerable in the face of our own mortality that all manner of interventions and potions and medicines are devised to delay or prevent or deny it. Aging and death are so feared, especially in Western cultures, that huge sums of money are thrown at its signs and symptoms. Worse yet, a weighted blanket of isolating shame is thrown over those signs and symptoms to hide them away from view, to assure that they're not seen and not acknowledged as real and inevitable. As we human beings find ourselves aging or threatened by what's going on in the world around us, as we begin to realize we ourselves are moving closer to that mystery beyond our own last breath, a debilitatingly heavy isolation is often forced upon us from all directions, from the inside, from the outside, making it so very hard to access our truest strengths as human animals. Our values and the ability still to the very, very end to adapt and find more meaningful ways to make those values evident and tangible and useful. Today, in honor of this month's theme of vulnerability, I feel moved to name awareness of encroaching mortality, its signs and symbols, as the most impactful, universal human vulnerability. There are a lot of things we are vulnerable about, but that's the one that unites us all. It's the thing that simultaneously unites us beyond all differences and all too often divides and isolates and disempowers us. Now, I want to name that this is not an easy subject. For some, it's a topic that may hit a little bit too close to home. And so I encourage you to be mindful of your needs during this hour and beyond. Please join the sharing circle and speak to the pastoral care team if you'd welcome a confidential conversation during the week. My intention for today is to demystify, to destigmatize that vulnerability by naming some of the ways in which it typically plays out among us humans so that we can more readily identify and apply the spiritual and practical strengths that are actually always available to us. I have to start by naming that the culture we swim in promotes claiming and, when necessary, feigning strength. Strength being defined as youth, independence, whiteness, wealth, confidence, resoluteness, stick-to-itness, success, no fuss, no excuses, no detours, no whining, no help. I grew up learning that vulnerability, understood as the opposite of strength, is to be abhorred. It is not safe. It is not acceptable. And those seen to be vulnerable in those particular ways were to be and are largely marginalized, pushed to the edges. Being white, I was not to question the strengths and privileges automatically bestowed upon me because of it. Raised a feminist, I was supposed to do everything I could to eradicate the vulnerabilities too long thrust upon females. For a while, that meant mimicking some of the animalistic protective posturing of male culture, like wearing big shoulder pads. Do you remember that? Shoulder pads allowed women to take up more space. And an added benefit was that you could tuck pepper spray inside the shoulder pads in case the posturing doesn't work. For that reason and that reason alone, I miss shoulder pads. As an American, I was taught the myths of manifest destiny, of national superiority and rugged self-sufficiency. I saw one white male politician after another make inhumane choices in order to maintain facades of personal and national strength, without ever conveying doubts or regrets, because those would be seen as a sign of weakness. As a budding professional, I was taught by other professionals to be, or at least to appear to be, confident in all situations. If you don't know the answer, just make it up, I was told. Always manage or publicly mask your insecurity or your pain or your fear. To paraphrase one mentor, it's all kabuki. Never let them see you sweat. That was some really misguided advice. Surrendering to the graying of my hair in my 40s and to the other increasingly visible signs of advancing age has been openly condemned as a radical political choice by more strangers than I ever dared believe possible, especially in Southern California for some reason. But that wasn't why I did it, or why I let it happen, at least not at first. That choice was born, quite frankly, of my exhaustion. Keeping up the appearance of youth, keeping up the appearance of strength, as defined by this culture, is exhausting. There was a surprising measure of relief in learning to surrender to the inevitable, even if vanity still sometimes gets the better of me. Over the years, so much effort went into keeping up appearances of strength that my physical, emotional, social, and even spiritual health suffered. And I have to say, I feel vulnerable sharing that with you. But I'm making the choice to do so from a place of strength because I care about you. Because as your minister, at least for the time being, you are always going to be my focus. What can I share with you that might be meaningful to you? My care for you gives me strength. I see so many of you struggling under a weighted blanket of similarly oppressive definitions of what it means to be strong, under similar ideas of what it takes to be perceived as strong in our artificially imposed gender and societal roles, Strong in the midst of change, strong in the midst of professional leadership, including church leadership, as well as strong in facing the signs and symptoms of aging and mortality. And my heart aches for all of us. Truly, my heart aches because I'm investing in faith that our purpose and potential as human beings is so much bigger and stronger than all of that. And because as much as we may be mysteries to ourselves and to one another, really, our deepest yearning is not to be. We don't want to be a mystery to ourselves or to one another. Our deepest yearning is to be known and to feel worthy and cared for and empowered as we approach the mystery beyond our last breath. As we strive to journey through life with integrity, to live in such a way that those beside us and those yet to come are inspired and emboldened to do likewise. That kind of journey takes, among other things, faith. Which brings me to the religious underpinnings of today's focus on the relationship between vulnerability and strength. The thing is, every religion, every culture is built around stories of human beings grappling with mysteries, undertaking journeys into the unknown, into foreign landscapes, learning to let go of old identities and old stories, learning to surrender to new realities and possibilities, and thereby to forge new identities. All of which can be so very frustrating and make us feel so very vulnerable until those new strengths and possibilities start to be discovered and trusted. In Hebrew scripture, we learn of Avram and Sarai's leaving home, journeying into the unknown, and we hear of the hospitality that they offer to others that they meet along the way. We read of Joseph and his brothers and father traveling to Egypt and how that changed them. And by the way, keep in mind, they had other people with them, including women and children. We hear of Moses and those 40 years of wandering in the desert, 40 years that were apparently necessary in order to process the trauma of their past and to prepare them for the next chapter of their communal life. In the Gospels, we read of Jesus shaking the dust of home off of his sandals so that he could more readily heal the strangers gathering elsewhere, yearning to be known and cared for by him. Even the Buddha wandered. Before his awakening and enlightenment, even the Buddha wandered, left everything behind, and entered foreign territories unknown to him. Each of these excursions into the realm of the unknown, into mystery, into vulnerability, were pivotal, essential, and transformational. Each of them involved unmasking vulnerability, a willingness to face and grapple with shifting times and circumstances and roles and responsibilities, a willingness to hold needed boundaries and simultaneously to surrender to possibilities beyond their wildest imaginings. What these ancient stories teach us is the importance of courage, the importance of trust and faith as we undertake our journeys today, here and now. They teach us about faith in the journey, faith in one another, and faith in the future, and faith in the bigger picture. For some people that can be translated as faith in God. I share this with you in part because as a human animal, this is personal for me too. I struggle with when and where and why to reveal my fears and my inadequacies. When will that be helpful and when will that be manipulative or harmful? I struggle also, like many of you, with when and where and why to show up despite those fears and vulnerabilities and inadequacies. To trust that in many instances, it'll be okay. And it may just be exactly what's called for. It's taken a long time to realize that I don't have to be perfect, to be known, or to feel worthy or cared for. So that's my story. And as a parent, and as a minister, and as a mentor to those taking on professional religious leadership, those issues have been a big part of what I insist we talk about. Because among other things, this is the spiritual work that consciousness relegates to all of us as human animals. The work of consciously being present to our journey, honoring where we've been in order to be more fully present to where we are and to the possibilities ahead. That work is ours as human beings. It doesn't belong to the owl or the cat or the toad or the frog or the skunk as far as we know. Embracing the fact that there are things about the journey, about ourselves and about one another and about the relationship between strengths and vulnerabilities, even about what happens after death, and even about other things that will ever remain a mystery. Embracing all of that is part of this work too. At core, spiritual work does involve balancing hospitality and boundary setting. It involves understanding and honoring the roles and responsibilities we have carried or we're carrying now or we need to let go of or we need to grow into by virtue of our most preciously held values. It involves healing and empowering ourselves and one another, and encouraging one another to grow into new, more committed, more principled versions of ourselves. That is the spiritual work of every religious community, including this one. And I share this with you ultimately because, pragmatically speaking, we each face the inevitability of one day no longer being part, an active part, of that human drama. That's the reality of mortality. And while aging and death is something we may fear or resist thinking about, it is the journey we all are on. So I, together with your pastoral care team, would like to point out some opportunities to transform fear and vulnerability around all of that into love-powered strength. First, you're encouraged to listen to Jack when she shares with you opportunities for connection and growth and service in this community. There's so many wonderful things going on here. Become part of it because they all are expressions of love. Talk to one another about what you need in order to feel known and cared for as members of this community and as members of your family and as members of society. Speak up and listen to one another's experiences. And keep thinking outside the box. Human beings are nothing if not adaptive and innovative. One of our Aging to Saging groups recently shared with me that instead of focusing on what gets lost along the way in terms of the ability of elders to contribute actively to communal life, it's important to remember that many of our elders have already contributed a lot. and may actually welcome an opportunity to slow down a little bit and give other people a chance. But that doesn't mean that we can't or don't contribute now in our own way. There are so many ways to contribute. So let's keep lifting those up to one another in the spirit of love to see what's possible now. Let's keep in mind, for example, that for some, evening events can be hard to manage. So planning or asking for online or daytime activities can make it more accessible. It's a loving thing to do. In awareness that online activities can also be problematic for people of all ages for reasons having to do with medications and vision and hearing, as well as access to equipment and technical know-how, it's become important, especially since the pandemic, to understand that online content and connections may not work for some of us. We may need to ask for or to offer other more creative ways to connect. Again, it's about making it possible for all of us to journey together, to keep journeying together, to feel welcome and worthy and empowered. Along those lines, at our next pastoral care meeting, I'm hoping to talk with the team about arranging an alternative worship service and gathering at Woodlake. Several of our elder members live there, and it would be lovely if we could go there in person to be with them. So if you're interested in being part of that, please let the pastoral care team know. Another way to show love for one another, to turn our vulnerability into strength, is by taking the time to update legal and financial documents related to end-of-life wishes. So at least those wishes don't remain a mystery to our loved ones. Another more immediate and practical thing to do is to consider how your values shape your wishes regarding your memorial service for when the time comes. We're in the process of developing new forms to help you with that, regardless of age or health status. It's an important thing to think about. Keep an eye out for those forms. They'll probably be ready for release next month. And know that the pastoral care team is available to accompany you as you work through those forms and think about the possibilities. It's never too soon to think about these things, because no one knows when and where and how their last breath will be taken. No one knows what happens after that either, by the way, in terms of heaven or hell. We live with so many mysteries, and that can feel scary, and it can be hard to remember that in the midst of our very real vulnerabilities about that, we do still have strengths, and we can and must access them while we can. What we do know, what we must know as Unitarian Universalists, is that we're here to help each other get real about all of that, the full complexity of what it means to be a human animal. We're here to help each other, not let the vulnerabilities get in the way of knowing and believing that we are held in love and we are worthy just as we are, and we are empowered every step of the way. We are not here to posture, to mask our vulnerabilities, or to use them to manipulate one another. We are here, as Mary Oliver wrote, to love what is mortal, each other and ourselves, in all our human complexity, in all our familial and institutional, abundant, essential, mysterious, malleable, covenantal, confounding, comforting, and transformational, coexisting vulnerabilities and strengths. So it is, and so may it be. Thank you.